Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and I'm here with John Dowell, familiar face from older Wham videos and all the outros, of course. We've done a lot of work in Canada in the past, and we are now both in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, for Anarchadelphia 2019, and I figured I'd open it up for as many questions as I can possibly get to while my battery remains functional. It is very loud out here, so let's actually move further inside. Make sure to press like if you're just tuned in, and send in your questions, and we'll do what we can to go over as many of your questions as humanly possible. Now let's try and get somewhere where it's not crazy loud. Anyway, I think this should be good. So anyway, how's it going, John?
It's going really well. I'm enjoying my time in Philadelphia. It's been really nice to meet a bunch of voluntarists and anarchists and crypto people down here.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
the most voluntarists I've ever been around, so
Yeah.
it's pretty awesome. I haven't been able to make it out to any of these conferences before this, so it's great to come down here.
It's a large community, but there's also it's spread out, worldwide.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's good when you can get a whole bunch of people together that can talk about a lot of these things. I see some comments coming in. Yeah, stole first like. Well, congratulations to you, Dave Bongo Slide. Should have gone to Fargo. I don't think I should have ever gone to Fargo. I'm not interested in going to Fargo. I was there a few months ago, and I kept on going. I'm from Winnipeg, so I have had my experience of North Dakota, and the west of North Dakota is pretty nice. Lots of rolling hills, beautiful terrain, but I don't make a habit of hanging out in Fargo. Faro. What's Faro? I have no idea what Faro is, so I cannot even comment on that. Someone just said
FARO.
Spain. Spain. Okay, that's a bit different than Fargo. I will go anywhere in Spain. I love Spain. I have not heard of Faro or Faro or whatever, though.
You just made someone in North Dakota angry.
I don't really care.
Gonna get a dislike.
Whatever. They understand what I'm talking about if they live in Fargo. Fergus Courtney says, can you buy a coffee with crypto there? That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not sure if you can, but I've bought coffee with crypto on multiple occasions and across the country. In Spain, there's a huge movement in the direction of accepting cryptocurrencies as payments. So, everywhere you go, lots of restaurants, you see the Bitcoin emblem on the door, often Litecoin as well. It's expanding. I mean, can't expect it to happen overnight, but it's definitely something that you see a lot in Europe, and I've noticed that a lot. And I even saw that in Africa when I was there. There were a few people who were taking Bitcoin. So, middle of nowhere, their currency is worthless. What are they going to do? Well, here's an option for payment where you're not going to lose your value in the next week. You might lose a bit, but long term, you end up making gains on that. And for people who are living in a third world country, especially, that is pretty important and helps a lot of people maintain their life. You see that a lot right now in Venezuela. Venezuela has gotten, last time you heard about Venezuela, when was the last time you heard something in the news about Venezuela, John? It's been a while.
Yeah, they haven't really been focusing on it in a while. There was that period when it seemed like Mike Pompeo and others were kind of beating the drums of conflict with Venezuela for a bit, but it seems to have really died down. And I haven't really seen the mainstream media talking about it. You're right.
Yeah, well, it kind of hit the news, and then, yeah, exactly as you said, there's a lot of talk about how, Trump might intervene in Venezuela. But I think the only thing I've really been hearing about Venezuela since then is the use of crypto. I've heard a lot of people talking about, how they've used Dash and Digibyte and Bitcoin and other things in Venezuela. Dan is looking at my phone currently.
Hi, everybody. 32 people watching with only 10 thumbs up. That doesn't add up, guys.
I
Click
know.
the button.
I know. Out of 133,000 people, of course that makes sense. Why wouldn't there be only 34 people watching? And that is the shadow banning that we've been talking about a lot. We just did a panel a couple days ago with Dan here regarding independent media. I got a video coming out soon where I interviewed him about this, and it's strange because we're at a point where it doesn't matter how many viewers you have. You could have like 3 million people subscribe to you at this point. You still end up with like 100 people watching at a time at the most. Maybe you can get up to 150 if it's breaking news, but it says a lot. So press like if you haven't already. We got 36 out of 133,000 people watching. Share the video. It's one of the only ways I can actually reach people these days is through live streams, and it's still pretty sad because it's like 36 people out of all of the subscribers. Any news about Quadriga? I have. Last I heard, it was absolutely terrible, and a bunch of people lost a bunch of money, and that was the last I heard about it. I'm not sure the latest news on that. I reported on it a couple months ago, and literally nothing has come out other than one of the guys being involved being considered, he went by a fake name and he was an international criminal of some kind, wanted by all these places, and then he did an exit scam. Well, people said he died, but I actually think he probably faked his own death because he went to a place in India that was known for people faking their own deaths, and then suddenly he dies with all of the keys for Litecoin. Well, actually, Litecoin was the one thing they were able to get out of there, I think, but Bitcoin and all these other cryptos, and all these people lost millions of dollars. Thoughts on the oil field attack? There was an oil field attack? I have not heard this news. Dan, you hear anything about an oil field attack? That's one of the things about going to these events. You get to talk to a lot of great people and hang out, but you also miss a lot of news. So please fill us in on this oil field attack. I have not seen anything about it, and I can't look online while I'm doing the live stream. Will you ever Pappy Mihijos says, will you ever discuss issues of status and nationality? I'm not exactly entirely sure what you mean by that. Like, as in issues of becoming a citizen or
Aboriginal status?
Aboriginal status? I mean, it depends what you're talking about. Like, we're here in the U.S., and I know that there's a big issue with murdered and missing women in Canada, not so much in the United States, but I can't really give you any information on that right now. Francisco Thomas says 50% of production in Saudi Arabia stopped because of the attack. Well, that's actually really big news then, and it also coincides with the oil price dropping dramatically after John Bolton was fired. We just got a $5 super chat from Crypto Futures. Thank you very much. Again, those super chats are basically everything that's keeping us alive right now because monetization is dead on YouTube for the most part. They demonetize their videos for the first couple days. They still put ads on them, but they just take all the money. Anyway, Crypto Future sent $5 in the super chat, and they said, it's been about 3 months. Could you interview me on the tampering with the sun and how it's affecting me? Well, I haven't gotten any emails that I've seen from you, man. I mean, if you send me an email, like, again, worldalternativemedia@gmail.com, send me information. I haven't seen any emails, so I can't really tell you one way or another. Just send me that information. If I missed it, I apologize for that, but yeah, I haven't seen anything. We got 55 people watching. Wow, crazy. This is a record for the last week. Yeah, it's sad. Press like. Start using coil service XRP. I'm not a big fan of XRP, but if you want to use that, good on you. I'm not a supporter of XRP, man. Sorry. But those super chats are basically what is keeping us up and running right now. So basically what's happened is we've lost about 80% of our audience in the last, I'd say 9 months or so. And I feel like we're at a turning point. We have to start moving towards different alternatives, like float.app, like flote.app. We are on there, BitChute as well. I think it's really important in those super chats. Those are literally what's keeping this media hanging on right now. And it's really intense how fast they're kind of coming down on independent medias at the moment. Gary Green says, hey Josh, listening from the UK, love your YouTube videos. Thank you very much, Gary. Richard Johnson says, Aramco refinery and port drone attack Houthi
Strikes
rebels.
knock out half of Saudi's oil capacity, 5 million barrels a day.
What? Do you know who did the
So
attack?
I'm just reading the CNN propaganda article about it here, and they're saying that Yemeni Houthi rebels have claimed responsibility, but the U.S. State Department is saying it was more likely Iraq, apparently, that did these
Iraq?
attacks. That's really what it says in this.
Why would Iraq?
It's a CNN article
I
that
know.
I'm reading, so it's pretty ridiculous.
Let's think about that for a
Yeah.
moment. Why would Iraq, which is recovering right now and actually doing very well in the north anyway, why would they bomb Saudi Arabia oil refineries? That would be like shooting themselves in the foot. This sounds like more nonsense. I'm not going to jump to any conclusions because I literally just heard about this.
And it's
But-
from a news outlet that has Chris Cuomo as one of their pundits.
So they're not blaming Iran, they're blaming Iraq.
That's what it just said in the CNN article that I was just reading. Yeah.
That's
I'll pull up the
crazy.
exact quote here.
So they want to cause more instability in the region is my first thought on that. Like, let's arm some rebels. And then maybe Iraq will fall to pieces again. Because Iraq has been recovering rather well. We just got a $50 super chat from Night Angel Marine who said, quick question for you. How do you explain the decrease of knowledge and tech from the pre-dynasty days of Egypt to the steady, trackable days of progression since early Egyptian days? So you mean, how do you explain, like, the sudden loss of the knowledge over time? I mean, if you have people that are telling you and instructing you how to do things, like they say in the EDFU building text, etc. We'll get back to that story in a moment, by the way. I have to answer this question. Thank you very much for the $50 super chat. That's awesome. If we go to the EDFU building text, for example, and they talk about the lost civilization, the circular island structure, and the passing on of information, it is the idea that they resettled down the Nile and they passed on information immediately after to people, and they were showing people how to do things. No new things would be invented. They would only be recreated or redone. So as they passed down that information over the eons, obviously like a historical game of telephone, it would be similar around the world. You'd see that connection, but also it wouldn't be exactly the same. And you'd see it get more and more primitive as time goes on, as people forgot the knowledge, as wars raged, and the scriptures were destroyed, and the wall texts were destroyed, and a lot of these buildings were demolished. And that's the kind of thing that I would imagine would erase a lot of that information over long periods of time. Because of course, one can't deny, like, the first pyramids were the best, the greatest, the most well constructed. The later pyramids were the least well constructed, the most primitive. They were falling apart. They were rubble. They weren't well cut rocks, and they weren't heavy rocks. And basically, a windstorm can knock them over. So when you see that kind of differentiation, you have to assume, at the very least, that there was some level of forgetting lost knowledge or ancient knowledge, that maybe scriptures got burned, used as kindling. We saw that a lot in Turkey as well. A lot of ancient scriptures in ancient Armenia and elsewhere, they were burned to keep places warm during winter seasons. I mean, imagine the history that was destroyed. The Spanish in their conquest in the Americas destroyed almost everything in sight of the Mayan, Olmec, Inca, and Aztecs. So I think that's really important to note in context here when we're talking about how a society gets more and more primitive over time. So anyway, thank you so much for that $50 super chat. That is basically going to make our day here, as well as our other super chat earlier. Those super chats literally are all we really have right now. So thank you so much. That's really, really awesome of you. We should get back to this news, though, because this is I haven't really heard much about this. So
the CNN article really did say that Mike Pompeo had blamed the incident on Iraq, but that's CNN for you. I think they meant to say Iran, because I just looked at Mike Pompeo's Twitter, and he says, Tehran is behind nearly 100 attacks on Saudi Arabia, while Rouhani and Zarif pretend to engage in diplomacy. Amid all the calls for de-escalation, Iran has now launched an unprecedented attack on the world's energy supply. There is no evidence the attacks came from Yemen. And then he's got another tweet. He says, we call on all nations to publicly and unequivocally condemn Iran's attacks. So he's flat out saying that it was Iran.
So essentially, there's an attack on a bunch of Saudi oil refineries, and they are already coming out with they know it's these people.
Because it would be so smart for Iran to attack Saudi Arabia. That's obviously going to go well for Iran, right? They have some incentive to want to get their country invaded.
So this is really infuriating. We've seen this going on for a very long time, of course, going back to the coup in Iran in the 1950s, the hostage crisis, the arming of the Ba'athist Party in Iraq against Iran, which later turned into, well, look, they have weapons of mass destruction because we gave them weapons of mass destruction, 40 years earlier. And this is really concerning to me to see that they are continuously pushing that Iran narrative. Of course, this comes a week after John Bolton was fired/resigned, and at that time, Pompeo and Mnuchin were asked, does this mean they're going to be lowering pressure on places like Iran? And of course, the former CIA director, who's also being considered for the new NSA, he said, no, we will not withdraw pressure on Iran. In fact, we will increase pressure on Iran. And so all these people, the military-industrial complex is done. Oil fell because, Bolton is out. All these people that want so badly to see, Trump end all these wars, which is what we see with every president, because presidents always get elected on the basis of being non-interventionist. Even Bush ran as a non-interventionist. We see this perpetuation of that military-industrial complex. And so the notion of Iran bombing a Saudi oil refinery, now they could have, but realistically, why would they shoot themselves in the foot like that? It seems so wrong on every level. What do you think? So Dan, we found out while you're away for a moment that Iran, they're blaming Iran now. They're blaming Iran for bombing this oil refinery. What do you think?
Well, obviously Iran's been on the chopping block for a long time. There's certain ties that need to be dealt with there, in particular with Hezbollah, because I think it's going to open the doors to Syrian invasion as well. So yeah, obviously this has been a part of the agenda for well over a decade, probably a couple of decades now. So yeah, we can't exactly be trusting what we're hearing from CNN on this, because that makes absolutely no sense. We know they've yeah, they're going after them now. So I don't know. It seems weird. I'm not buying the mainstream.
Yeah, they've been going after the Kurds for a while too. I mean, and that's one of the things that I was talking about from day one when it came to Syria. Remember the amount of times that we saw Tillerson or someone within the Trump administration, H.R. McMaster or Trump himself, say we are going to withdraw pressure on Assad. We will fight alongside Assad against ISIS, etc. And then, like 3 days later, for no reason, Assad would chemical gas his own people and children for no reason. Keep his regime up and running. The notion of him like, I'm just going to bomb children for no reason with no benefit, and people buy that. They don't buy it, and that's one of the things about independent media that we need to save, is that most people don't buy that. And if it weren't for independent media, people wouldn't be looking at this story the way they are now. Because I think if the Iraq War was pushed under in the time frame of YouTube, say circa 2012 or 2013 or something like that, I think the majority of people would have been like, information at our fingertips, we aren't going to support this war. And that's one of the things I find so important about independent media, because nobody buys it. You even look at the mainstream media and all the panelists are like, why would Assad bomb his own people for no reason? And I really hope to God that this happens again in the case of something like Iran, because I do not want to see Iran get bombed. I know that Trump has a trigger finger in a lot of these cases, and people like to say, no, he doesn't. He just fired Bolton. Well, it hasn't stopped him from pushing to create a Kissinger scenario where the head of the State Department might actually be his new national security advisor. He was formerly the head of the CIA. I mean, why would anyone think, Bolton's out? Well, but Pompeo, I'm sure he's not going to want to bomb every country in sight, even though he was saying during his testimony that the number one issue during the administration for him was Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. I mean, it's so ridiculous, but we are on the verge of something very, very bad if we are hearing this news that they're going to start blaming Iran for this. Is it going to get people pumped up enough? I don't know, but when people mess with Saudi Arabia, it doesn't usually end very well for them. And I'm more concerned that not even the U.S. will go to war with a place like Iran, but Saudi Arabia will. And you can only imagine the tensions in that part of the world if that happens. What do you think are the possibilities here going forward? Because I don't want to like assume that something's going to happen, but we've been over 1 million of these stories over throughout our careers in independent media, and we've all read the stories going back to the Iraq War and previous to that. What do you think could possibly come out of something like this, Dan?
Well, like you said, we've seen this time and time again, and luckily and thankfully, we've been able to pinpoint and show our audience over the years that the way this happens often is through false flag attacks. And now that's getting to the point now where people hear that word, ooh, false flag. This is one of these conspiracy guys talking about it. It's like, no, this is a very real practice. It's a military term where you fly the flag of another country in order to pin the blame on your political enemy, and it's a tactic that's used over and over and over and over again. And we're starting to see the pattern. So I kind of hope that these things are going to fall apart because people are just not going to buy it anymore. I mean, the Assad gassing was a ridiculous display of this problem, reaction, solution type of order out of chaos mentality that they have. But more and more people are exposing them as they happen. These so-called foiled terror plots all the time are all turned out to be set up by the CIA and intelligence insiders. We're exposing this. So I think it's to the point now where, we may have brought this information to the table enough so that it's going to be very difficult to pull it off moving forward.
Yeah. Now, Luke is coming to mess with us, but I should let him know that we're talking about war with Iran right now, so probably not the best time to be an idiot. But anyway, so what just happened, I don't know if you heard about this, Luke, and if you can wipe that stupid smirk off your face for a moment. What happened is that there was an oil refinery bombing but that is being blamed on Iran. Have you reported on it yet, Luke?
No, not yet.
Why?
I will. I wait till the actual facts come in before making a determination on a single event.
Wow.
I think that's very important for independent media to do,
Yes.
not just read headlines and jump to conclusions. So I'm waiting patiently, anxiously. Who gave me $50? I don't believe this. Hold
Yeah,
on.
right. Yeah, well, no, that's really important, though. We cannot jump to
That's a good
conclusions,
point.
but it's really also important to see that the mainstream media is making the assumption while we're not. I mean, you mentioned we're not making any assumptions. We shouldn't make any assumptions. What the mainstream media is doing right now, CNN writing articles blaming this on Iran.
And they actually use the word Iraq because they're
Yeah.
so sloppy. They literally
Yeah.
does say, they may have corrected it, but it's
Tehran, Iraq. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. Good,
I mean,
good reporting, CNN.
Yeah.
But this is really concerning because this is exactly what I saw in cases like Syria when the chemical bombs happen once each April. I feel like every April this seems to be a story on in the headlines. Assad bombs own people for no reason. Being used to seeing so many of these mainstream stories over the years where immediately after an attack we see CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, CBC in Canada, etc. make those determinations. So I'm kind of just I'm under the assumption that this is probably not going to be reported on honestly, and I think it's important for the independent media to put feet to the fire in this case because this is how I think we stop wars. I think we stop wars by getting enough people to agree that we shouldn't jump to those conclusions that Luke was just alluding to. So anyway, K Ninja says, Josh, remember Mauritania? I do. I definitely remember Mauritania. Carl Stowe says the assumption is CIA is behind it to increase the price of gas. There's definitely a lot of theories about it. There's no doubt about it. I remember, Dan, you got in a lot of trouble years ago after what happened in, I forget where it was. I think it was a Moncton shooting or something like that, where you said, we got to wait to see what happens. We need to see what the story tells us as time elapses. And of course, you got a lot of trolls for that because, I mean, that's one of the things that we as independent media should be doing is to look at the story and try and understand the story before we say, you know, these people are responsible, or the Vatican's responsible, or you know, some entity or some nefarious kind of person or thing. And you know, that's where a lot of independent media does go wrong, actually. And I would have to completely agree that there's an issue where while mainstream media jumps to conclusions, some independent medias out there jump to conclusions as well. So we need to be responsible with the information that we get at our fingertips, and do whatever we can to look into that information and make the most of the information that we have, instead of saying this is what happened because it benefits my viewpoint. Anyway, Hollywood Chester says governments are all globalist satanic cults. Well, that would be one way of putting it. Organized crime is another way of putting it. I mean, they're definitely not in it for the good of mankind. They're definitely in it for just creating dependency and servitude among the populace. And I think that is a really important point to be made while we're talking here. We got a $20 super chat from Night Angel Marine. And they said, faith has been destructive, but that's not an answer. They burned the great library of knowledge, but knowledge of how to do things wasn't lost. And as far as wars, they have always progressed tech. The army with the best rockets doesn't win. Well, I feel also that we would have to assume that the government, thank you, by the way, for the $20 super chat. That's awesome. I feel like people have too little faith in the good of mankind as well. I mean, when it comes down to it, yes, the government has the big guns, they got all the rockets, they got all that kind of stuff. But first of all, they destroy their own empire if they use it against us. Second of all, I mean, the vast majority of the people, if they're well armed, if they're able to defend themselves, and the vast majority of the military polled as well, who say they would not turn guns on their own people, I think we have to have some faith in the notion that we will not, the government isn't going to suddenly drop an atom bomb on us and disintegrate us, because, you know, I think that is too far.
Much. We're worth too much right now to be dropped atom bomb.
Yeah, yeah. So I feel like another thing that's really cool on the free market is everyone is starting to realize 3D printers are becoming bigger and bigger. 5 years ago, you could not have thought of creating 3D printed guns. In 5 years, you can only imagine how that's going to be. People can create guns in the garage in like an hour now with like pieces from an auto shop and a Walmart. So I actually think I have a lot of faith. I have a lot of optimism going forward, and I actually don't think that it's as grim as it seems. But for the time being, it is not. We're not in a good situation. We have to be aware of the propaganda. What do you think, John, about the propaganda we're seeing as far as you know, Iran and Syria and all these entities that they always want to blame all the world's problems on?
Well, what's crazy to me is just ever since I was a teenager, the U.S. has been coming out with all this anti-Iran propaganda, and it's just, I wonder how many more cycles of this there'll be. Like, I remember in 2011 when they had that conflict around the Strait of Hormuz, and the Strait of Hormuz was blocked off. I remember thinking, oh, this is finally going to be, Obama's going to be the one to start a war with Iran, because, you know, Bush had named Iran in the axis of evil, and there was a lot of anti-Iran rhetoric from Bush, but they just never really got around to starting that war. They were too busy with Iraq and Afghanistan. And, you know, I really thought an Iran war was going to start under Obama. There's been several times under Trump where there's been a lot of rhetoric, but it just never has quite gotten to whatever tipping point where they can actually push this war through. And I hate to say it, but I feel like we've seen this so many times. There's going to be a time when they're just not going to care that there's not public support, and they're just going to push through the war anyway. I mean, the war in Iraq was widely opposed, and they just did it anyway.
Yeah, I feel like there is a bit more grounds for opposition today, for sure, compared to back then.
But no, there's a lot more people talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the internet has allowed people to get more perspectives than they probably were in 2003.
It's a funny thing, though, because I mean, the internet was probably created by the government as a surveillance mechanism in the first place, and it has been one of the best things you could have ever imagined, because it was hijacked by the free market and free information. And I think it's done. It's amazing the revolution we've watched over the years as far as that goes. But Dan was mentioning before false flags, and that's something that's off limits on YouTube today. You can't talk about false flags because they'll just take down your video. And recently we saw one of our videos just taken down and a community guideline strike placed on us, and it was crazy because to get to the point where it's not just like talking about like school shootings and stuff like that. And if you talk about 9/11, which is the not the vast majority, but the majority of people polled believe maybe the official story isn't exactly true, maybe not a false flag, but maybe not true. The majority of people feel that way, and YouTube still feels that they have the ability to just take down the video and get away with that. And I think that tells you about how arrogant and how tough they really think they are in this battle. It's really concerning. I did see another $5 super chat come in. I really appreciate it. Night Angel Marine, really appreciate your support. Goes a long way here at WHAM these days, especially. I said, you misread Army with the best rocks doesn't win. Yeah, well, I'm not sure how to decipher that. I apologize if I'm missing something here. I did just wake up a little while ago, but Army with the best rocks doesn't, or the biggest rocks doesn't win. I'm kind of just at a loss for words there.
I never heard that one. I guess there's been those times where that was true, like the Zulus that fought off the British in that big battle.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can win a battle without having the best armaments.
Well, I mean, actually, I would have to say, look at the U.S. Revolution in that case. I mean, the U.S. Revolution, those fighting in the Revolutionary War, were heavily outnumbered, and barely had anyone compared to the British world empire, the biggest world order at that point. And I could just imagine the triumph. I mean, it didn't last very long, and the central banks came in pretty quick. Thanks, Alexander Hamilton. But I mean, nonetheless, that was probably one of those stories for the history books, just like ancient Rome too. Ancient Rome started as a republic after they overthrew a king. And I mean, it was a great triumph because they were heavily outnumbered again, and they triumphed. But obviously, the empire ended eventually soon after. Well, not soon after, but soon after they started doing deficit spending, going into wars like crazy, and creating vast amounts of coinage, and then clipping the coins to save on metal so they could print more worthless nonsense. Let's see. We got a bunch of comments in. I can't keep up with all of them. Timothy Lynch says to give a big blow to the Saudis. They're moral enemies. It's possible is all I'm saying. I must have missed the original comment. I can't see it here. You said, I think it's possible that the Iranians really did this. Well, I mean, why would they do that? I mean, look, Saudi Arabia is much more powerful than Iran. First of all, the whole world wants an excuse to go to war with Iran and has for 70 years. Why would they do that? Why would they do that to themselves? That seems like suicide. That's like North Korea actually shooting a missile at the United States. I mean, First of all, the U.S. can shoot it down the second it's launched. Second of all, their whole point is preserving their empire. And if you shoot a missile at the United States, your empire is going to get destroyed and everyone's going to die, and a whole bunch of people in South Korea are going to die. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, you just have to go to the most likely possibility in this situation. And the most likely is that why on earth would Iran bomb Saudi Arabia, one of the biggest powers in the world, and hit their oil refineries while governments around the world bow to Saudi Arabia? It makes no sense. What do you think?
It's pretty hard to believe, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just, I'd say, ridiculous to honestly think that Iran would want to be invaded and want to have regime change. I mean, it's what nobody wants that. So.
Yep, we got Dan looking like he's ready to go. Are you about to go live on YouTube?
Gonna continue the conversation over on my channel.
Well, yeah, because he likes stealing my viewers. No, I'm just kidding. My battery's actually pretty close to dying, so I think he caught on to that. Thank you so much for the super chats. I guess the next super chats are going to Dan, and we'll pass it over. Oh wait, yeah, that's right. He's demonetized. I'm sorry, buddy. He's completely demonetized. So go and support Press for Truth at pressfortruth.ca. We got to keep our independent medias alive. We're not competing here. This is all about being able to preserve information, free information for the masses down the line, once we're probably going to be gone from YouTube in the near future. And join me over at flote.app, flote.app. I really appreciate all the support, and time to go to Press for Truth's YouTube channel. Another super chat before we go. Thank you, Night Angel Marine. Says the American Revolution invented guerrilla tactics, war invented the wheel, the road, the internet. There's definitely, let's continue this conversation, because my phone is actually really close to dying, and I'm appreciative of your passion and your messages that you're sending in, and your super chats. So thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate that, and it feeds us, it allows us to keep the lights on. So again, check the links in all of our other videos, because I don't have any links in this video, so I can't actually tell you that. Go to our other videos. We got all of our donation options and everything. We got lots of videos going up all the time, and we got an interview with Dan Dix going up very shortly as well. So let's go to Press for Truth on YouTube right away, and Kai Ninja, yes, I will be returning to Mauritania hopefully next year. Anyway, thanks for joining us, everyone, and until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. And now join us on Press for Truth.